Hey, komm, hau da etwas Geiles raus, Mann. Jesus. Ich hoffe so, dass sie mal die neue Cubes-Firma annehmen von der Commodore, Alter. So eine easy Head-Sieg. Halt. Da. Ich glaube, die erzählen nachher etwas über die Adventures of 17 Billard. Please. Irgendwie check ich das so ein fucking Cover nicht, Alter. Das ist so.
Hi, I'm Graham from Blackmagic Design. We've got some really exciting products to show you today. We have a whole new camera, so there's going to be some really interesting things to talk about. But first, I'd like to start with A10 Mini. You know, the A10 Mini customers are doing some really amazing work, actually some very creative work. You know, A10 Mini just has so many different uses, and it's because it's so powerful. But it's often used on location, and the internet connectivity is really tough on your mobile because you've got to find someone to plug the Ethernet into, and that's often not possible. So we've been really working hard on this problem, and what we've got is a new software update that lets you tether your mobile phone to the A10 Mini. Now it supports all the A10 Mini Pro models, and that's because they're the ones that actually do the live streaming. It supports both Android and Apple phones. You pretty much just plug the phone into the USB connection on the A10 Mini and it works. The A10 Mini Pro will automatically recognize the phone when it's plugged in. There's no settings, you just plug in the phone and it works. So let me show you how this works. Now the A10 Mini Pro here is set up to live stream to YouTube. And on the rear monitor, I've got the web browser with the YouTube display in it, so it's live streaming through. Now, the A10 Mini Pro here is connected to the internet via its Ethernet connection. One thing that's really important also to know about before we do this is you have to activate the tethering on your phone to actually make this work. So I've got a phone here. It's got the tethering enabled, which is the phone here, and I've got a USB cable, so I'll plug the phone in. There it is there. And I'll plug in the other end into the USB port on the back of the A10 Mini. So what will happen is, I don't know if you can get an overhead shot of that, but there it is, the little tethering icons come up. It's a bit different, I've got an older phone, so this phone's a newer one.
Fuck,
so
das ist ein geil, Alter.
Now, the A10 Mini can see the phone, and if you look on the multi-view, you can see there's a little phone icons appeared on the streaming status view. So what we do now is we'll unplug the Ethernet and see how it switches across. So if I unplug the Ethernet, you'll see the icon on the multi-view is actually grey. So I've unplugged the Ethernet here, and what you'll see is it'll switch across. Now, you can see the icon's gone red and it's flashed the on-air indicator, and that shows that it's now switched over and it's live streaming. And you see there's a little bit of interruption in the live stream, but it's done a clean switch over, and now it's running with the phone data and not the Ethernet, because the Ethernet's not even plugged in. So let's switch back. So we'll plug the Ethernet back in.
Also warte schnell, dass die anderen auch können.
And you'll see that, I'll straighten myself up here a little bit. So the overhead camera looks great. and you'll see now it'll switch back. The phone icon's disappeared from the streaming status indicator, and it's gone back and it's switched across, and now we're streaming back on the Ethernet. It also does something that computers don't do very well, and you just saw it. Basically, that's changing between mobile data and Ethernet. The AT Mini Pro will keep streaming when the network changes. You can switch it backwards and forwards. So if you have an Ethernet problem, you can plug your phone in. But a lot of times, software applications actually need to be quit and relaunched, because they'll actually connect through one of the services and they don't really switch across. But AT Mini doesn't need to do that. It'll just switch live, even while you're streaming, and you just saw how it did that. Because we've got full control. It runs Blackmagic OS, so we've got full control over the whole process of how we connect. And another thing I think it's really also important to think about with this phone tethering stuff is the mobile data speed. Phones can vary a lot in data rate. I mean, every internet connection can do that. Also, the data rate will go up with frame rate. So there's a lot of things to consider. Also, 5G phones are faster than 4G phones. So if there's not enough speed to do the live stream through your phone, there are some options. You can switch to a lower quality. You can also switch to a lower frame rate. And so lower frame rates are okay, of course, because all the inputs will just convert. So even if you're running 1080p 60 and you wanted to, say, stream at 24p because the data rate is too much at 60p, you can switch the switcher over to 24p. All the inputs will just convert and it'll all just work. So it's really good. So I think this mobile data will be really helpful to people. It's actually in a new software update. It's called ATEM Update 8.6, and it'll be available on our website today. We'll post that. It supports mobile data on ATEM Mini Pro and the ATEM Mini Pro ISO models, because they're the ones that got the streaming built in. And also it'll be available free of charge, so you just be able to download the update and add that.
Das ist geiler Scheiß, ehrlich. Also wenn du
Okay,
überlegst,
so now I
so...
wanted to discuss the ATEM Mini family as a whole. The ATEM Mini has been really well received. It's got a lot of professional features, and these are not dumbed down switches, but they're true professional switches, for important work, even though they are HDMI. People have used the switches in a lot of ways we never expected, which has been quite a lot of fun to see. I mean, some remarkable ways. It's quite shocking. So we thought, really, how far could we push this design? We wanted to try and we were sort of thinking, could we build a really much more powerful model? But how far could we take it? Like, really, how far could we push this? Could we build a high-end switcher, but kind of in an ATEM Mini design? We weren't really sure if it was possible. We've been working on this for a while. But it was a challenge we kind of set ourselves.
Ey, hau jetzt wieder so eine ATEM Mini
there's
raus,
a bunch
Mann.
of challenges.
Shit.
Could we make it affordable enough? Could we
Ich
keep the
hab schon
advanced
3
electronics
Versionen,
model
Mann.
without fan noise, which is really important because often these switches are used in the same environment with the cameras, so you don't want the fan noise being picked up. Was it even really possible to fit a big switcher into an ATEM Mini design? So, well, not fit exactly. It has grown a little bit in size, but we've been able to do it. We've pulled it off, and the new model is called ATEM Mini Extreme. It's dramatically more powerful. I'll bring one out and show you. I've got one here, so here it is.
The fuck?
It's quite big.
Betrieb, Alter.
Much bigger switcher. You can see the size difference there.
Sicher um die 3000 Stutz oder irgendetwas, Alter. Verkaufst eine
You
halbe
see, it's got a
Niere.
much bigger control panel. A lot more controls.
8
It's, it's a
Inputs,
monster,
man.
this
Heppratz.
thing. So if you're looking for a more powerful ATEM Mini, then this is it. We've really gone for it. So actually, I'll start by showing you the back. Let me put that aside. I'll move the phone out of the way. Let's have a look at the rear view. I don't know if you can get a close-up of that there. So there are a lot more connections on the back. So you can see that it's got the 12-volt DC input. Now, it includes a bigger power supply because it's obviously uses more power. There's gigabit Ethernet built in. We're going to be able to use it for a few things in the future as well. So it's got tons of fast Ethernet. It's got the streaming built in, so it's a bit like the ATEM Mini Pro models, a bigger version of ATEM Mini Pros in some ways. So you don't need any external streaming software because that's built in. It supports YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Vimeo, and more, just like the ATEM Mini Pro models do. But it now has 2 USB connections. So this is important if you want to, maybe you want to use a webcam while you're recording to a USB disk at the same time. Or say if you want to do recording while you're live streaming via the phone, because it supports the phone tethering as well as the ATEM Mini Pro now does. Of course, you can still connect a USB hub, so if you want more devices, but I think it's really nice having 2 USB connections built in. It's much simpler. Now, it's a HD switcher, so all the HDMI connections support up to 1080p 60, and it has 2 independent HDMI outputs. Now, these work like aux outputs, so you can route different video sources to them. And this model has 8 inputs as well. Obviously, it's twice the number of inputs. So more inputs means you can use more cameras, and that's really nice if you're using if you can't afford camera operators and you want to just use more camera angles, so you can just add more cameras. Now each input has a separate standards converter, so you could have 8 different video standards plugged in. You just plug everything in and it works. The microphones are the same microphones work. there's now an additional headphone output, and the headphone's a proper monitoring output, so it's on a separate audio monitoring bus. So let's check out the front again. In fact, what we'll do is we'll plug it in, which is a bit of an ordeal with so many connections. Now I've got 8 hyperdecks that we're using as sources here. So let me just plug in. I'll actually sit it on top and start plugging away. Let's plug in some power, and I'll plug in the network, and I'll plug my video output. And I'll go through the inputs because there's quite a lot of inputs here. So sorry, it takes a moment because there's so much to plug in. It's the problem with the bigger switcher that's got so many connections.
Hey Sally, du hast schon auch Blackmagic verwendet, oder wie?
Pro, move it out of the way. Actually, I'll position it so you can see on the overhead camera, because we've got a camera overhead here. Now I've got a whole bunch of extra inputs because of the number of sources. I've got an extra output, which we'll plug in because it's got the 2 video
Das ist so sick, man, sure.
And I've got 4 more inputs. So I've got quite a lot of cables. And so these are all hyperdecks playing back these different camera angles of a cooking show. But camera 1 is actually a pocket camera just over there. So there we go. So we've got everything plugged in. Looks good. And we've got all nice and straight.
Aber so eine XLR wäre so hure geil gewesen, wenn so eine Zoom F6 oder F8
So
hättest.
now I've plugged in the multi-view, plugged, well, both video outputs and all inputs. You can see the multi-view is a little different, so I'll get into that in a moment. But let's have a look around the front panel and see what's on there. So we've got it now running with all 8 inputs connected, so I can just switch between all those sources. So you see there it is. And also there's the smaller source buttons over here, so you've got like 2 media players and a few more things there. You can still change between cut and auto, so you can still do the transitions, just like you can with the ATEM Mini. Of course, auto is the sort of industry standard way of selecting a transition versus a cut. Any ATEM customer would already know that. Now it's got the same transition duration buttons, so it's 1/2 second to 2 seconds, and they're located just over here, so you can change the durations of the transitions. And they've also got a fade to black control here, so it looks very similar to an ATEM Mini. Now the transition selection is located above the auto button over here, and we've got more of those. So you can set to different things. So like, for example, at the moment it's set to mix. So when you do a transition, it'll be a mix.
Ich hoffe, es ist nicht zu teuer, man. Ich kaufe mir so ein Shit, man.
Dip, for example. There it is. And you've got like 6 wipes on there. There's more buttons for different transitions. So you've got 6 wipes, and including horizontal, vertical, diagonal, circle, and square wipes. There's also DVE transitions. So if you can select some of those DVE transitions and do those, so you can see that they are. And the DVE transitions on the buttons directly include push right, squeeze right, push down, squeeze down. And I'll switch back to mix, and in fact I'll switch back to cut. So you can see that you've got a few more transitions over there. There's also upgraded video output controls because we've got more sources now. So the HDMI video outputs are actually like aux outputs, so you can route video to them. So output HDMI 1 has settings on the control panel here, and so you can see the location of where they are there. Now you can route sources out using the ATEM software control, where you get access to both video outs and you can use them both like auxes, but you can view it on the front panel here. So let's have a quick look. So I'm looking at, in fact, if I can switch the video across, I can see this. So that's the second video output I've got on the back there. So I can now switch the sources between the camera inputs to that video output live. And you notice that, it's basically a clean feed of the video sources, and it's very, the switching's very clean. Now you can connect this to a video projector, and one of those inputs could be a slideshow, and you can switch the video projector from the front here. So it's almost like doing a separate live switch. And also Video Hub control panels work. So that's nice.
The fuck?
You've also got a multi-view output, but we'll set it back to program because we're actually using a 2-monitor display. So you can see you've got a lot of really nice controls there. Now it's got the same streaming controls on the top right of the panel there, the same on and off air controls there. You've also got the same record and stop controls. There's also some extra key controls, which we've got over here. You have the key 1 and downstream key controls on there now, and it's nice to have a downstream key button. So if you're using a logo on the downstream key, you've got that. Now again, all the keys are all available in the ATEM software control. So that's nice.
What the fuck?
Now the other thing we've got on the front panel is a bunch of macro buttons. All ATEM Mini models have macros, but the ATEM Mini Extreme has 6 macro buttons on the front panel that you can fire them by pushing one of those buttons. And there they are there. It makes them much more accessible. You can set up really complex effects and just trigger them just on one of those buttons there.
Das ist fucking geil. Wenn so Overlays machen mit so Grafik über Greenscreen.
So you can do like a 2-up views for interviewing people. There's front panel buttons with some presets for you. So you can select some of the DVE buttons, and I've got, I can select the DVE on there. You see I've got
yes.
the 2 up, I've got the different views there. I can select a few of the different ones.
Das ist
At the
nice.
bottom there's the 2 up view, and you can see I've got 2 there. So that's pretty nice. And you also, again, get full control of the DVEs from the ATEM software control. But these preset buttons make working with DVEs really fast. So I'll leave that. I think that's off. Now, the other thing we've got is a select bus. Powerful switches have what they call a select bus on the control panel. Now, what it does, it allows you to control the sources into internal processing, such as DVEs. So let me show you how this works. So say, for example, something like the dip transition, which I'll select over there. Now, we were using a color generator. When we did this before, there's a source for that dip, and we were using a color generator. That's why it was white. So when we did a dip, it went to, oops, I've got to select order. So when I do a transition, you can see it was white. Because it was using a color generator, and that color generator is white. But what it allows us to do is we can change the source that we're going to use for that. Now the sources are along the top here, so you can see that, and the destinations are along the bottom. So, and the destinations include inputs to keyers, DVEs, the DVE video sources, the dip source, and a lot more. So the dip is along the bottom here. So let's have a look. There it is there. So that's the dip source. So we select that on the bottom row, and then you can see that it's showing the color generator on the top row. And I think we probably picked that up on the top camera. And so you can see that. So we could change it to something else. So for example, if we change it to bars, now when I do a transition, whoops, I changed it to black. There's bars. So there you go. So now I changed the dip source to bars. So you can really see how fast it is to change sources on the front panel itself. So let's change something else. Let's change one of the DVEs. So I'll turn the 2 up view back on. So let's turn the DVE back on. So you can see I've got the 2 up view with the DVEs. And now you can see I've got those 2 DVEs. So let's change the inputs to those DVEs. So the DVE sources are actually over here. Whoops, there they are. DVE1. So now what's really interesting is I've selected DVE1 on the lower row, and you can notice that the top row is now showing that that's the input, one of the camera inputs is going to that DVE. Now what's really interesting is that they went red. What this means is the DVE is on air, and it's a warning to show you that anything you change here will be seen by the viewers. So if I turn the DVE on and off, then you can see the color changes back to white. So you can see it's like a tally on the select bus, and let you know that if you change anything, people are going to notice it. So I think that's really nice to have that. So let's select color bars. So you can see I've got some color bars. I can select some different cameras. The camera numbers are over here, so I can go through different camera sources and select those into the DVE. So you can see I've got, when I change the input, the DVE input changes. So the select bus makes this stuff much faster because you can really route all the sources. It's the same workflows you see on really big switches, but now we have it here right on the front panel. It's really fast and it's really simple to use. So
kann mir jetzt irgendwie mega Mühe vorstellen, wo das nützlich war.
Now the other thing we've got in ATEM Mini Extreme is camera control right on the front panel. The buttons are located just above the inputs, so it allows really quick camera adjustment. So if I cut to camera 1, we have a Pocket Cinema Camera 6K connected to input number 1. So I can cut to input number 1, which is just here. Now this camera has studio features including lens control, tally, and a color corrector. So we can control that from the switcher. So if I go between camera 1, if you can get a close-up of the screen on the back, you can see as I'm switching to the camera and back again, I've got the tally light coming on and off on the LCD on the back. Now iris is the default control. So you'll notice here we've got up and down arrows. So if I start adjusting those, you can see I'm now adjusting the iris. And that's the most common control you need.
Oh, das ist geil,
If you're using outside, you're doing outdoor shooting, the lighting conditions can change. So you can track those lighting conditions. So you can see there I'm changing the iris. But there's also other camera settings you can control as well. So you just need to select the override buttons. And those 4 buttons above here, if you can see that, you can see them on the overhead camera. There's all the arrows here for the iris. But these 4 buttons will override those up and down buttons. And you can say, for example, we can press gain or well, that's black, and then we can adjust that setting. Oops, there it is there. You've got to be fairly quick.
Ich würde Ihnen sich etwas überleiten.
There's buttons for overriding the levels for shutter speed, black, level, and focus. The focus one's actually quite interesting because if you, I'll show you basically how this works. If we just focus and really make the camera go out of focus. There it is there. So I've adjusted that camera way out of focus. Now what you can do is you can press and hold the focus button to trigger the autofocus in the camera. So if I just press and hold that button, you'll see now it'll trigger the autofocus in the camera. So it's a really great way of really fast using the camera's features itself to do the focus. Now the camera control is really simple, but it's surprisingly powerful. You have full camera control, obviously, in the ATEM software control, but it's quite useful to have all this on the front panel. And of course, you can also use one of the ATEM camera control panels, if you really want to go for it. Now the audio controls is another set of features on the front panel. They're very similar to the other ATEM Mini models.
Also leider wegen dem Autofokus und wegen den
with more inputs, we still have
ISO changes.
full
Das
audio
ist jetzt
processing
geil
on all the
einfach.
inputs. So each input has audio processing for, like, it has a compressor, 6-band parametric EQ, limiter, expander, and more. That's on all the inputs. And there's also now, what's been added is headphone controls for the headphone output, and they've been added on the panel here. So you've got level up and down. You can set the levels up and down. You've also got a mute and a reset as well. So that's nice for headphone control right from there.
Okay, das ist neat. Das ist nice to have.
Even though that's the front panel, we haven't really described what's inside yet. Up until now, we've really only talked about the front panel controls, but the really big increase in power in this switcher is the internally. So what I'll do is I'll change over to the ATEM Mini software control, and we can check this out. So, well, the first thing we can actually talk about is the new multi-view. So what I need to do is plug in using USB into the software, because we haven't got a connection up here. So let's plug in my USB, and we'll plug in into one of the two USB ports that we've got on the back. So now we should have the ATEM software control come up. There it is. And so you can see the multi-view is a little different to the ATEM Mini Pro. I don't know if we can cut to that. We've actually taken the multi-view from the ATEM Constellation 8K. It's our best multi-view by far. It's an incredible multi-view, so this is why we wanted to really bring that across. So we've taken it from our top switcher. It still includes the audio meters on all the views. It still includes custom labels on the views, which the other ATEM Minis can do. The ATEM Mini Pros, sorry, the ATEM Mini Pros are the ones that have the multi-view. But now you can also select the number of views. It supports up to 16 views in total. So let me show you how this works. So over in the ATEM software control, all we have to do is go to the settings and select multi-view. And you can see here's our multi-view settings over here. So if I want to change to 16 views, for example, I just have to click on this little icon here, and it'll now change to 16 views. So I can also change sources. So for example, I could change, well, actually that's already on the audio status. So, or I could change it to, anything I really like, one of the color generators. Well, I've already got a color generator, number 1 there. I could do it on color generator 2. So you can see it's quite nice, and I'll switch it back to my program view, which I have there. Now 16 views is really great with those two HDMI video outputs.
Bitte sag mir, die Software ist auch für die anderen A-Teams verfügbar.
We actually are showing you behind. I'll go back to a nice shot. So one monitor has the 16 sources on the multi-view, and the other one has the program view. So that's a really nice combination to have, because you can use those two outputs to really give you that big program view, and then you've got tons of views on the multi-view. Now the ATEM Mini Pro also has a media player with 20 still frames. With the latest software update that we did on the ATEM Mini Pros, they even retain those still frames between a power cycle. But with the ATEM Mini Extreme, you now get 2 media players. So let's take a look at that. So if we switch to the media play page, I'll get rid of this there. And if I go to the media page, you can see I've got the 2 media players. And we can load a still into media player number 1. So I've just loaded a still into there. And I can load another graphic into media player number 2. In fact, the default media players have already set up to use slots 1 and 2. So now you have 2 video sources into the switcher, and you can see them on the multi-view. In fact, the multi-view by default shows the 2 media players there. Now, previously we showed you using DV preset buttons to turn on the 2 multi-views. We've got, DVEs. We've got 2 DVEs in the switcher. This is great for interviewing multiple people. You can show like 2 different interviewers at the same time, so that's really nice. So let me show you the DVEs in the switcher. So if I go across to the palettes, I can see I've got my upstream keys, and there's the DVE. And you can see I can turn on that keyer. So there it is there. And I can move the DVEs around. This is where you do the adjustments. Whoops, I've got to click it there. So you can position those all over the place.
Yo!
Change the size.
Das ist geil.
So you have 2 DVEs are really nice. So I'll turn off.
Das ist, glaube ich, auch nicht
so
vorne können.
DVEs built in, and that's just really flexible. But with so many inputs, we also thought we could do a lot more. More inputs actually allow us to do some pretty exciting things. So we've actually included SuperSource in the ATEM Mini Extreme. Now, what SuperSource is, if you don't know, because you haven't used some of our bigger switches, SuperSource is 4 DVEs in a multi-layer compositing engine. So what this means is you actually get 4 video sources as separate DVEs in a layer stack. So you basically get a 4 DV kind of layering engine, plus you've got the 2 DVEs that are actually built in there. So that's 6 DVEs in total in the switcher. There's also, the SuperSource has support for a background graphic as well as a foreground graphic. Now a background graphic goes behind all those DVEs, whereas a foreground graphic goes over the front of the DVEs. And that's actually really very powerful because it allows you to create like really nice graphics with borders and things because it goes in front of the DVEs. Then it really creates nice borders on those DVEs. So it's really nice. And so SuperSource is fantastic for interviews where each interviewer has a separate picture-in-picture. You know, it's great for gaming competitions. You can have 4 cameras and 4 consoles all connected at once because you've got enough inputs.
Alter, ich wollte den verdammten Preis wissen, Mann.
Of gamers and their console, consoles or overlaid on top. It's really nice. So let's have a quick look and we'll show you how this works. So what we do is we'll start by selecting SuperSource on the front panel. We have a dedicated button on the front panel for SuperSource. There it is there. And now it's basically by default, it's a 4-box setup, as you can see there. Now this is the SuperSource. It's not even the normal DVEs, but you can also change it in the ATEM software control. So what you do is you go into the SuperSource palette, which there it is there. And you can see I've got a bunch of different interesting combinations you can select. And you can show the arrangement positions and you can set all the inputs to the SuperSource.
Okay, das ist aber fucking geil, wenn ich jetzt zum Beispiel etwas so zeige.
Boxes and then do the controls and change the inputs and all the settings and where they are. And you can also load in a graphic. So for example, if I go to the media player and load in a foreground graphic, I can now change that into media player 2 and I can go back to SuperSource and I select art. Now what I need to do is I need to select media player 2 as my graphic source, but it's made that graphic the background. I actually want the graphic to be the foreground, so let's do that because it's got borders on it and the borders actually now become the DVE borders. So you can see there it's all lined up and it looks really nice. Now, you know, you can spend a lot of time getting all this perfect. We've actually got the graphic. This graphic just supports the default SuperSource layout. But really the trick here is to line up all the DVs so they match the graphic. And, you know, we made this graphic to suit the default SuperSource layout, so we didn't have to spend time doing it here. But you can really see how powerful it is. Now, SuperSource is really separate to those 2 main DVEs. So that means they're still available if you need to use them for something else. Although I'm not sure how much stuff you can really put on the screen at one time. Now, the other thing we've done with ATEM Mini Extreme is we have 8 inputs. So we can do a lot more with the keyers. So what 8 inputs mean is that ATEM Mini Extreme is big enough to actually do virtual sets. So we now have 4 ATEM Advanced chroma keys in this switcher, which means you can do 4 separate chroma keys at the same time. They're all completely independent. So that's basically means you could have 4 separate cameras that could have a dedicated chroma key each. So you can use basically the 8 inputs to do virtual set, to create virtual sets, 4 live cameras over 4 live backgrounds. So 4 of the inputs we use for the cameras and then key them, and 4 inputs will be used for the live rendered backgrounds that are coming in from the virtual set processing. Now, a lot of virtual sets actually use our decklink cards. We even have a quad HDMI model. So, you know, I reckon third-party developers could even create some really interesting virtual set rendering machines. But you could also use macros and the media players to do fixed camera virtual sets. So let me show you the keyer palettes in the ATEM software control. So if I go across, I'll close the SuperSource one. Well, actually, we kind of showed you this before because we used it for DVs, but there they are there. See, they're 4 independent keyers. Now, what that means is you can control these with macros and you can switch the media players into the keyers. So what that means is you could create a fixed camera virtual set all in the ATEM Mini Extreme without any extra hardware. So each camera would have a pre-rendered background. So you could basically put that behind the camera. So you can key the camera over a green screen and then put that background in the back. And if you don't move the camera, you don't really need a live motion virtual set. You can just render out some still frames from a 3D model of a set and put them behind each camera and then use the macros to switch the media players into the keyers. So it's an incredibly powerful having 4 independent chroma keys. I think it's going to make the whole virtual set thing possible. I mean, that's a whole new world that we could really pretty much open up. So it's really quite exciting. Now, of course, the big question then, what about bigger work? What happens if you want to take it even further? What happens if you want to build a bigger studio? So the ATEM Mini Extreme is really the perfect match for the ATEM 1ME Advanced panel. In many ways, that became our yardstick of how big this switcher should be. Let's just make it perfect for an ATEM 1ME Advanced panel. It's a totally professional setup. It unlocks a lot of the power in the switcher. There's dedicated buttons. I've got a few slides here that you can see. It's got dedicated buttons for all the switcher functions. The design is a very traditional broadcast switcher, so it's great for training and education. So using that ATEM 1ME Advanced panel.
Also warte schon, wenn sie das irgendwie zusammenführen, oder? Ich check jetzt auch nicht. Das ist auch schon ungefähr $4,000, Kollege.
Extreme here. And so we're running the whole panel from there.
Hey, verrat
Now
mir
it
echt den
shows,
scheiß
the great thing
Preis,
is you can
Mann.
see, and I'll bring up some slides here, you can see that all the
Ich glaube, ich
buttons have
kaufe mir
input
so einen
labels,
Scheiß, Mann,
so
ehrlich.
you can have custom source names. Now there's 10 buttons on these panels, so that supports the 8 inputs of the A2 Mini
Bruder,
Extreme and plus the 2 media players
please.
all along that row. And there's a shift button, so you can switch to another 10 sources. You can also see there's a nice big T-bar fader handle. It's got direct access to the downstream keys on the right-hand side there. You can see there's a select bus, which has got all the labels on it. So again, if you custom label the inputs, it's not just numbers, they're actually custom labels. And that select bus will switch to macro control. So there's a macro button. And when you switch over, then all your macros, you can see them by name. So if you're using, if you've done a bunch of custom macros and you've labeled them by name, then you can actually see the actual proper names on the panel because you've got an LCD for the labels. Now it's got a really large system control LCD, gives you really fast access to all the settings. You get a joystick for moving those DVEs around for both the super source and the normal DVEs. So I think the A2 Mini Extreme is a really perfect size for this panel, and it adds a completely professional workflow when you plug it in. So really this switcher can go much further if you now fill it out with some of the control panels. And you wouldn't even know it's an A2 Mini model switcher when you're using it, if you didn't know. Also, we have the ATEM camera control panel. It's got dedicated control for all the cameras. That's also perfectly matched for this. It's got 4 controllers, but you can change the controllers really quickly.
Ja, ist das ein Update,
you can do more
oder?
than 4 cameras, and in this case, we'd want to use 8. It's got a really nice big knob on the front, and that's the iris control, which is the default
Ist
control.
das ein Update? What the fuck? Warte, jetzt muss ich
If you
nachher
rotate
schauen.
the control, it actually sets the black level. And if you push the control, it actually selects the camera to
Erinnert,
the
dass es
output.
die
And that's
Anzeige
something that's used by
drunter
camera
hat.
operators when you can use one of the, because they're proper aux outputs, you can use one of the outputs to give the camera operator a view of his cameras. So you can be using one of the camera video outputs for multi-view, while your camera operator is actually pushing the knobs and switching that second output so he can see what he's doing, and so he gets a chance to match the cameras by really quickly switching between them. There's also RGB knobs for tint, and that uses the color corrector in the camera. The pocket cameras, for example, have the color correctors built into them, and you can use the
Das ist sicher ein Update, Alter, das kann ich nicht.
controls as well. So you can really see how powerful A2 Mini Stream can be when you realize that once you use it with those panels, really how nice it is. It goes all the way.
Nein, ist kein
to the most
Update, das ist
professional workflow you can get.
ATEM ISMI,
Really, let's
Advanced
summarize what we
Panel.
have here.
Blöd.
We've got 8 inputs. Each input has standards conversion. You just plug anything in and it works. The audio
Preis,
mixer
Digga,
supports
wie
processing
kostet
for all
es?
those
Wie viel?
inputs, which
Wie viel
means
ist?
every HDMI input has a separate limiter, noise gate, compressor, and EQ. There's
Das
4
schaut die
upstream
2000
ATEM advanced
Franken.
parameter keys. They're the good keys, the most advanced keys we have in ATEM switches. There's 2 downstream keys for titles. There's 2 media players for graphics and titles.
Tell
There's 2
me
independent
price.
DVEs for picture-in-picture effects. There's a super source with another 4 additional DVEs and a multi-layer processor. There's a select bus on the front panel. The multi-view supports up to 16 different views. Both HDMI outputs have source routing, so they work as aux outputs. There's a separate headphone connection with audio monitoring bus, so you've got separate audio monitoring control of that. It's really basically like a 1ME HD version of our Constellation switcher. It's basically the best 1ME switcher we have. It's way more powerful than actually our 1ME SDI model. So it's really exciting. It's an insane switcher. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's insane. Tell me
Now, the
price.
A2 Mini Extreme will be available now for $995. I reckon it's going to be really exciting to see how people use it. Who knows what kind of new workflows are going to be possible, particularly things like that. So it's really exciting.
Kann het kaufen.
Now, that's not all we've done. We have an ISO model of our A2 Mini Pro. So we thought it'd be really nice to have an ISO model of the A2 Mini Extreme. And we do have that. It's called A2 Mini Extreme ISO, and it records all 8 inputs and the program video. Now, this model features a massive record engine. It basically records 9 streams in total. It saves the DaVinci Resolve project, so you can record and open up your whole live production as an edit. It means you can fix bad edits, replace shots, and add color correction later. You can even trigger the record in the Blackmagic Pocket cameras, because those Pocket cameras support Blackmagic RAW files, so you can link them to the edit. And that's how you can actually do an Ultra HD film workflow in a HD switcher. So it's a great combination. The combination of Blackmagic RAW and color correction makes film-looking shows. So obviously we wanted to have an A2 Mini Extreme that can do that. That's why we felt it was really very important for us to have an ISO model of the A2 Mini Extreme. It's really quite amazing. Let me bring one out and we can have a look. It's
100.000 US, das ist irgendwie voll geil, Alter,
you
shit.
can see it's kind of quite simple. It's very similar. It's the same. Actually, I'll put it above it so you can see both models compared there. Let me line that up. So you can see it's basically it looks the same as the A2 Mini Extreme, except this is A2 Mini Extreme ISO. So we'll plug it in, we'll transfer the connections across to this guy here.
Ah, okay, gut, die soll natürlich gar nicht aufnehmen.
Transfer the connections. A little bit undignified for the switcher that's below it, but let's change the connections across. So input 3.
Ich hätte schon gemeint, ich könnte Daisy chainen und verlinken ineinander. Is that too much?
There's so many inputs. Input 6, input 7, input 8, video output number 2.
Nein, das ist nicht.
Connections on the back are exactly the same. I'll move our USB up and I'll change our Ethernet. Plug that, and my switch has really gone offline now. And then we'll plug in
Wie viel ist der jetzt?
AT-Mini Extreme, and I'll take that AT-Mini Extreme out of the way. And let's line it up so we can get that overhead camera looking good. There it is there. So you can see it's all lit up and it looks very similar to the some of my audio there. So you can see it basically it's the same as the AT-Mini Extreme, except it's the ISO model. So it's got similar multi-view, everything's there. It's got some different setups in it because it's a different switcher.
Hey, du kannst auf
Now what I'll do is
ZDs
I'll plug in a flash
gleichzeitig.
disk, which I've got here. I've got 2 USB ports, so I can plug it into the second one. So I'll plug it in there. Now, because it's 9 streams, you do need a decent flash disk. Some flash disks aren't as fast as they say they are. They'll do bursts at high speed, but they won't sustain it. So make sure you're using a good quality flash disk. Now, what we'll do is we'll go to the record palette because I've got to show you that. So it's in the output menu here. If you can cut across the UI, I'll turn off the live stream. Now, you can see it's the same palette as the AT-Mini Pro models use. So what we need to do is set the ISO recording on. So this is the control here. So if you turn that on, now it's will enable the ISO, and you can start recording. Now I can do that on the front panel, which I will do. You can do it from the UI as well. And there it is now. Now I'm recording to the disk. I can change between some of the different sources, do some cuts to different sources here, and I can do some transitions, maybe do some dissolves. There's a dissolve. So it's just like a real job.
Wie teuer ist jetzt der Scheiß?
Got a nice fast transition there.
Ich glaube etwa 1500.
Now it's worth mentioning that you can use a USB hub and use multiple disks.
1499.
If you're recording with multiple disks, it'll move from disk to disk as each disk fills up. So you can record forever if you keep adding empty disks. You can also use a Blackmagic multi-dock. It's 4 SSD disks on a single USB port. So that's really nice. Now, while it's recording, let's plug, I've got the USB actually, I'm controlling the computer by the USB. I'm not actually using it via the network, I'm using the USB connection. So I have webcam coming into the computer. So let's launch an app. I'll just use QuickTime Player. I had that open a second ago, so there it is there. And if I go to the file menu and use a video recording, I can show the webcam source. There it is there. So what I've got going on now is I've got a recording going on while I've got webcam source. And also, let's start streaming to YouTube. So if I turn on streaming, now I'll run the streaming. And so now I'm actually live streaming to YouTube, and it's now really heavily loaded up. I'm doing 9 streams of recording because I'm doing an ISO recording. I've got USB webcam going on the screen here, and I've also got live streaming to YouTube all at the same time. So now if I do some more transitions, I just keep doing that, and it's pretty nice. Now, what I can do is I can now stop recording, and we can go and have a look and see what it looks like on the computer. So I'll stop recording, and I'll stop streaming as well. And I'll close this. Now I'll take my disk. I'll plug it into the computer so we can have a look what it looks like on the computer. So we've got 2 USB ports on the side of the computer. So I'll minimize my software controller so if you can switch across to the ATEM. I don't want to use that as a backup. So there it is there. So here's my disk that I've just recorded on the ATEM Pro ISO. So I can open up the disk and see what's in there. You can see I've got a whole folder with all the files that have been recorded when I was doing my recording. Let's have a look inside. So you can see I've got my folder with my ISO files. You can see the 8 inputs there. I'll go back. I've got the audio source files. I've also got a program recording here. And this is the DaVinci Resolve ISO file. So this is the program file. So basically it's the edit. So if I double click that, I've got DaVinci running in the background. And it'll now open up that folder. And there's my edit. So this is what I just did on the switcher. So if you look at the timeline, this is the cut page. I did a whole bunch of cuts and some transitions over here. And then I was talking for a while, and I do love talking. And I was talking for a while, and then I did a few more transitions towards the end here. And you can see now that I can move edits around and really weave in and do all kinds of different edits. And if I go in here, I can see I've got my ISO files in here. There's all my different camera views. So there's that's just the recording from that one camera.
Schau mal,
So
die
it's all
verdammte Kamera
really
ist mal
nice.
blöd.
You can do all kinds of editing. So, what's also great is the Blackmagic RAW files I record. If you can record them in the camera, you can change those over and link to those if you wanted to. Now, I can also use the sync bin so I can see all the camera views. So if I go up to the sync bin up here, what I've now got is, go back to my master. Now I've got all the camera views back in a multi-view because they're all synchronized. They've all got the same time code. Now I can run up and down and now re-edit, especially if you're using the speed editor. This is really fast. And I can now, re-edit or change and drop I can use the source override edit mode, which is this one here, and it'll actually edit, various shots into the timeline and sync up all the time code and everything for you. So it's really fast to create new edits. And if you're using Blackmagic RAW files from the cameras, which you can also select to switch over to the link to, you can finish in Ultra HD. And you can also do color correction because they're all film gamma. So I'll switch back to the normal media pool. And so, I think
Also,
it's
etwas
amazing
eine
if you
Programmierung,
think you
wenn
can record this
Typ
switch will
so
record
gefühlt
9
2
VS
Stunden
streams all
reden,
at the same
Alter.
time. It's an incredibly powerful model. It's very exciting. So the A10 Mini Extreme ISO is just starting production now. So it'll probably be appearing in about a week or so. It's
Günstig
priced
als
at
verteilen. Toch, schön,
1295,
blöd.
and I can't wait to see how people sort of use it. I think it's going to be really exciting. Okay, so next I wanted to talk about how to add streaming to our SDI range of switches. Our Blackmagic Web Presenter has been a real popular streaming solution, but it was quite limited. It was basically USB webcam only, and it was the webcam was only 720p. So we wanted to totally redesign this model, but we also wanted to reposition what it was used for. So it was more than just a simple redesign. We wanted the new model to be more focused on sort of high-end workflows and to work with our most powerful switches that we have. The A10 Mini in many ways can now handle the HDMI workflows. So we really wanted a newer model that was really designed for an SDI workflow only. We also needed a solution for our ATEM Television Studio and our ATEM Constellation switches. So we've designed a whole new model, and it's dramatically more powerful. I'll go across here, and we've got a bit of space, and I can show you. I'll bring the unit out. So here it is. Here it is here. You can see the similar size. It's the same size as the old design, but it's a whole new design. Basically, our thoughts were it's a bit like a television transmitter for the streaming age. It's kind of the philosophy we used when we designed it. It's way more advanced than the previous model, and it has a lot more features. It removes a few of the features we don't need, like the HDMI input, because we don't need that now. But it's been designed specifically for high-end broadcast and live event work. So it's a much more sort of higher end. So we've repositioned it, and changed the underlying philosophy about what it's really now for. Now it's only a third rack width, so it uses our Ternix Mini rack shelves if you want to rack mount it. Let's have a look at the back. I'll turn it around. You can see the rear side. I think you get a close-up of that. So quite different to the old model. Now it's got a 12G SDI input, and it's got a Ternix down converter on the input. So you can take any HD or Ultra HD input and stream to it. It doesn't matter what the input video is, it just works. You'll see that there's also one loop 12G SDI output, so you can loop out to other equipment. And what that lets you do is you can build like an array of web presenters for multiple platforms, or even redundancy. For example, you could use the one web presenter for the YouTube primary stream and a separate web presenter for the YouTube secondary stream, and you can loop the SDI input across to all those different web presenters for the different platforms. It gives you a lot of redundancy. Now, there's also a HDMI and a 3G SDI monitoring output, which I'll talk about in a minute. The reason we put a HDMI output on there for the monitoring is because you can just plug a computer monitor straight in. So even though the newer model is designed for SDI workflows, having that HDMI in there means you don't need to use a separate converter just to monitor the output. Now, it still works with USB webcam. You see there's a USB on the back there, but now it's 1080p webcam. So it's much better than the previous model, which was only 720p with the webcam. You can also see the Ethernet connections there. So it's got the live streaming now built in. It's got a professional H.264 codec built in, so it'll now live stream direct to the platforms, to the online platforms. You don't need any computer software now. It's all self-contained in this one small unit. And you can use both the USB webcam and the live streaming at the same time. They both work at the same time. You can also see we've got two power options on the rear panel there as well. There's the AC for regular power, plus there's now a broadcast 4-pin 12-volt DC power for backup power. And you could use that with a separate power supply, and so you'd have two AC sources, one direct and one using the power supply, or that could be a battery, so you could stay on air in a power failure. So it's really exciting. Now let's turn it around. We'll have a look at the front again, and we'll plug it in and get it up and running. We need to plug in a whole bunch of connections, so I'll plug in some power. I've got everything here. I've been plugging a lot of connections in today.
Eigenlijk kan ik
Power,
nog wel
my Ethernet.
die naar je camera
I'll plug
switchen.
in. I've also got, I'll use the HDMI monitoring out, which I'll plug in, and I'll plug my SDI source. When that SDI source is coming from the A2 Mini here, so we've just converted the program out, so I can get a nice source there and plug it all in. So you should be able to see that on the front panel. Now it's all up and running.
6K,
now the old
Pocket
models, the
4K.
front panel was actually optional. Now it's included as standard, so
Scheiße,
you
man
get
kan je
that front
denken, zo'n
panel
webscars.
as standard. Yeah, because it live streams internally, you really need the front panel for control. You know, it's got that dedicated on-air button, so you really need to see, you really need to have
It's me
access
on
to that.
that.
And there's also menus as well. So let's see how that works. So we've got a computer up on the rear screen. If we can switch across to that, and that's got YouTube and a web browser, so we can bring the unit on air. And that's all there is to it. Now you can also do this from the utility. I've got a Mac over here, which I've got plugged into the network. This is plugged into the network as well. I can run the utility and show you. So if you can just pan across here and get a cut of the computer over here. Here's the here's the Blackmagic Web Presenter utility. So
Zeg maar echt die verschillende camera's, man.
Settings in here. It's similar settings to the A2 Mini, so it's very familiar. So that looks like the streaming tab in the A2 Mini, so it's quite a familiar user interface.
Fuck.
I've already entered the streaming settings in here, so it's faster to show you, so we can do anything. And so that's nice. So if we go back to the unit, you can see the front panel also has all the buttons for the LCD menus, and you can change settings from the front panel as well. So you can turn on the menu button over here. You can see I've got some menus. And the LCD also includes video monitoring and audio meters. There's a really nice big, if you look at the status of that LCD and you can get a bit of a close-up of that, it's a really big on-air indicator. I wanted an on-air indicator that's big enough that when you're looking across the room at a rack, you can actually see which web presenters are on air. So that's why we needed that a bit larger. The input video standard's also on there as well. And there's also a time counter showing how long the stream's been running. That even includes a day count. So it's actually day, hours, minutes, and seconds. The network status is there as well. Now it also supports the phone tethering like the A2 Mini that I showed you before. If the Ethernet goes down, you can switch over. So you can plug in the phone, a mobile phone, into the USB. The LCD will show what network is connections active because there's actually a network indicator there, whether it's Ethernet or mobile data. So I don't need to show you how the tethering works because it's the same as the A2 Mini Pro I just showed you. Now there's also, you'll notice on the front, there's a USB-C connection on the front panel. That also works as a webcam. So what's really interesting about that is you can basically walk up to the front of the unit and plug straight into it and monitor video with any software that works with a webcam. I was just using QuickTime Play before. Now that's great for diagnostics. And the utility also works through USB or Ethernet. So you can walk right up to the front of a rack and plug into the unit and get both live video and change the settings, all in that one USB connection. Plus you can plug a phone into the front panel as well. So that USB also supports a phone, so you can plug the phone tethering in. So if you had an internet problem when you're running, you can actually go and plug your phone into the front panel. So that USB on the front is really flexible.
Dat is mijn fucking guy.
So of course, you know, what other things can you do? Well, one of the interesting uses you can use is with editing. Now, on the Mac over here that I was showing with DaVinci, I've got an Ultra Studio Mini monitor connected to the Mac. It converts the timeline out to live video for monitoring, which is how you generally would use that when you're video editing. You want to see your user interface, but it's nice to have another video monitor showing the actual live video. Now, if I plug that into the Web Presenter HD, I can actually use it to stream to remote clients. So let's connect the Ultra Studio Mini monitor into the Web Presenter HD. Now I've got that connection here, so I'll unplug the A2 Mini source and I'll plug in my A2 Mini monitor and that'll switch over. Now what we can do is go across to the timeline. So if we cut back to the timeline here, I've got the utility running, so I'll quit that and I'll come back here to the timeline. And you can see now I've got the video from the editing timeline playing out to, I'll loop that and play it. This is my editing timeline now running out. And you can basically send the stream to clients and they can watch the edit. You just need to set the YouTube stream to low latency and it works really well. So you can see the Web Presenter is actually really flexible. You can use it for all kinds of tasks. I mean, who knows what else it could be used for. It's really quite nice. So remember the two monitoring outputs we talked about before. Let's connect those up and we can see how those work. So if we come back to the Web Presenter here, now I've plugged in the monitoring. If we can switch it up onto the screen here, we can see what's going on. In fact, I'll plug the switcher back in. I'll unplug the timeline and plug back into the switcher so I can do some cutting. So you can see there it is. Now, you can see if I cut to that directly, I've got a feed into the switcher. This is a high-end broadcast streaming transmitter, so we really wanted to do something serious with the monitoring. So it includes a lot more information than you'd sort of expect on a simple monitoring out. Basically, it's got everything I needed when I worked in post-production. You know, I was putting in digital systems back in the 90s, and I needed, you know, a lot of outboard gear that had different sort of information that I needed to make sure the whole system worked. I've taken pretty much all of that and just put it in this one tech monitoring output. So let me explain what's really going on this video output. So if you can cut to that, you'll see that output directly. So obviously we've got a very large video display. It's got audio meters, and those audio meters, you can select the type of audio meter. The VU meter is what we're using here. It's got the correct ballistics. Now there's a title at the top left-hand side, and you can change that. So for example, if you had multiple web presenters doing different streams, you could have like YouTube primary, YouTube secondary, you could name them, and that title at the top left will change. And it really helps you keep track of which web presenter is what if you're switching the monitoring. Like you could use, because there's an SDI monitoring out, you could actually run it into a router and have one monitor switching across all the different statuses of all the different web presenters. You got a nice big on-air indicator. You got a time counter for streaming, which is like the front panel. There's a bunch of streaming details as well. The platform, the streaming standard, the quality, and the streaming key. Obviously, we're only showing part of the streaming key. You don't want the whole key, otherwise people will just hack your stream, so we don't want to do that. Now, we have a nice little area for video status, and that's all the video input information. So there's a film strip, so you can see the last 6 seconds of the inputs. You can see a recent history of what's been going on as the video source. There's also lots of technical data. There's the input video standard, there's colorimetry, time code, CRC check, Luma and Chroma bit activity. Now that's an interesting display. Basically what you get as an X is displayed when the bit's changing between high and low, or it's an L when it's low, or it's a H when it's a high bit. And what that's really good for is seeing if you've got 10 or 8-bit video. Now if it was 8-bit video, the bottom 2 bits on the right-hand side there will be L's because they don't have any data in them. So it's a really good quality check, and it also can tell you if you have a stuck bit in some of the upstream processing. So you can really see what kind of things are going on. For example, if you saw some banding or something strange happening on the stream, you can have a quick look at the bit activity, see what the quality of the video level is, if it's 10-bit, or if you've got a weird stuck bit or some kind of other fault. They're broadcast engineers who actually know about the SDI standard might notice that all the bits are low when there's black video. That's because we've subtracted the SDI offsets to make the bit activity a bit easier to understand. So that's what we've done there. Because it's more a more user-based feature than it is a sort of a technical-based feature for the video standard. Now, the audio input area is actually quite similar to the video area. You see there's an audio waveform that shows the last 6 seconds of the audio. So it's a recent history of what's been going on the sound. There's also details of the audio channel status word.
Alter, bring auch die scheiß Kameras, Mann. Oder schnell über Da Vinci.
Now, we decode those bits and display the results. So you can see some of the information there, like sample frequency, emphasis, word length, origin, time of day, sample address. There's the aux bit status. Now, not all products that do audio, use this information, but generally audio works without it. But there's a lot of information there. It's almost like additional sort of information. Some stuff's used like emphasis, but not all of it. The CRC is checked and displayed. There's also a bit activity indicator like the video, but this one's showing the entire AES kind of audio word. And it's a really nice way of seeing the audio bit depth. Like you can check to see if you've got 16, 20, or 24-bit audio. The 4 flag bits are also shown, and they're labeled with the V, U, C, and P.
Ey, ich bin jetzt Hunger, das ist egal, schau.
Now this is, there's also
Ich glaube, ich mache noch ein Spaghetti oder so ein Scheiß. Aber Bruder, man, ohne Scheiß, schnell etwas über die Kameras oder über fucking DaVinci Resolve.
Now a lot of equipment can actually embed more channels than they really use. Like for
Das
example,
ist eine fucking Tortur, man, ich schwöre, Alter, das wird gerade aggressiv, Alter.
You've got to set the stereo, so there's only actually audio on 2 of the channels. But this is a great way to see what audio channels are present in the SDI connection.
Kollege,
And if there's a channel present, it'll be displayed.
ich habe die Mini-Kameras gesehen, Mini-Kameras.
Now you also
Bitte
notice at the
Cube.
bottom there's actually 2 graphs. Now this is the same data rate and cache indicators that are on the A10 Mini, or the A10 Mini Pro I should say, or the A10 Mini Extreme now. But there's actually a graph of the last 60 seconds of the history of what's been going on. So the data rate for the last 60 seconds is really nice because it shows you kind of the recent history of the data rate needed to encode this video. Now the data rate is really dependent on the quality and the frame rate and also the input video.
Alter, ich mache
So
Livestreams.
can actually affect how much data you're encoding to. So what you're seeing
Da
here is
bis so
what the
4
codec
bis
is actually
6
generating. This is the
Kameras.
data rate the codec's generating. So it's also
Kein
showing
Plan,
what
für
data
was ich
rate
kann
you need from the
brauchen.
network to get a good quality stream. So that's a really nice indicator, and it's always on, even if you're not live, on air. It still shows that. There's also the cache status for the last 60 seconds as well, and this shows you a lot about the quality of the
Aber der
internet
Mini
of the network
Extreme
connection.
ISO,
So,
der ist
if you're
fucking
having
geil.
problems with the network connection, you can see that going up.
Noch
because
für
the cache is
1300
struggling to
Stutz. Ich glaube, der
try and,
kaufe ich mir
get the
fix.
data out of the unit. So
Ist ja schon bei
it's really
Digitech.
exciting. So the technical monitoring output has really got a lot of useful
Blackmagic
information.
8M.
Now the Blackmagic Web Presenter HD is going to be available now, and it'll be $4.95. And it includes the front panel with the LCD
Darf
menus
ich
now.
nicht.
It's got the live streaming built into it to go to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter,
Okay,
and more.
Digitech jetzt
It
noch
also
nicht.
supports
Jetzt Brock.
webcam via USB. It includes this broadcast
Will
technical
bestellt
monitoring,
ASAP.
and it supports full remote control via the software utility on Mac and Windows. You know, it's only a third rack width, so you can get like 3 streaming channels in a single rack with if you put 3 of them. But it really fits perfectly next to the ATEM TV Studio HD. It adds streaming to all their SDI-based switcher models. So we think it's going to be a really exciting product.
Und
So now I want to talk about Pocket
Brock
Cinema
CH jetzt auch noch nicht.
Now it's been received really well,
Schade.
and so like the 4K
Aber das Ding
model,
kaufe ich
it's
mir
a
einfach.
true digital film camera. It's got a nice low light
8
sensor
fucking
in 6K.
Inputs.
It's EF lens mount, so it works with
Kontrolliere.
lots of
Ich
lenses.
kann mit Alpha Chance
You know, the
spielen.
large sensor is just perfect with EF lenses. There's so
Das
many
wird
Canon
sexy.
lenses around that have EF lens mounts, so it's very.
Ich bin
very common to
gespannt,
find great
ob ich
lenses
dann
with
auch die
Records
PTC-Kameras kann kontrollieren.
cards as well as external USB
Also,
discs. It's got 3D lookup
wenn wir die
tables.
da
It includes
ne?
Blackmagic RAW and Generation 4 color science. It's got a wonderful film gamma. Supports ProRes recording. It's got Blackmagic OS. It's got a really big screen for a handheld camera.
Blackmagic
A lot of handheld
OS.
cameras have tiny screens, but this is a big screen. Makes it really easy to focus. And there's tons of focus assist features. You know, false color, histogram, zebra, frame guides, focus peaking, you know, just lots of stuff. Plus, the HDMI monitoring output includes overlays for film sets. You can set up like on-set. But it also
Camera.
includes the studio camera features.
DaVinci Resolve 17.
ATEM Mini here.
Fuck off.
So it's really a production camera and a studio camera in the one design. Very easy to use, very high quality.
Ich bin ein bisschen enttäuscht, weil ich die Pocket 6K und die 4K gesehen habe.
So what does that mean? Well,
Anscheinend kein großes Hardware-Update.
Really well, and it's being rigged and used
Schade.
on high-end film projects. So we really started
So
thinking
eine
about
fucking
that, started
Flipscreen
thinking
wäre
about a
geil.
model that might have more features.
Oder ein langsamer Continuous
Could we put some of the
Autofocus.
features from the Ursa Mini Pro into the Pocket camera design? And we've managed to do
Please.
that. And so today we have a new model. It's a third camera in the range, and so I'll come
Alter,
across
hab Schnorre,
and show you.
Mann.
The new model is called Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, but it's actually a whole new design. It's slightly bigger, and it has because it's got a lot of new features included.
What?
So I'll bring one out, and you can have a look, and you can see for yourself. So here it is here.
6K Pro.
So I'll put it beside the other camera. So you can see from a design point of view, it's very similar. It has similar controls, so it's very familiar to use. But because it's a member of the Pocket.
Alter, der ist so steroide, Mann.
It's in there. So I can show you the front. You can see it's really similar. If you can get a close-up of that, you can see how that looks.
Ich kaufe 3 oder 4 von deinen Missgebürden,
It
Mann.
has the same, I'll turn it around there. It's got the same amazing 6K sensor. However, we've actually upgraded it to generate
Handyfilter.
from the 12K camera.
Das Ding in den
So it produces
Handyfilter.
some amazing cinematic images. So I think the first
Ist
thing
das ein
you'll
fucking
notice there is
Flipscreen?
It's got a new LCD.
Fucking
high brightness HDR screen.
Flipscreen.
It also tilts
Bля,
up and down.
Zucker.
So if I turn the camera on, get the screen up, and you can see really how bright that screen is. And so it's great for outdoor shooting, and I can tilt it up, and I can tilt it down. So you see there it is there. It tilts. So
Yo.
if I tilt it down, you can shoot high up. And you can hold it up high and shoot high up. And if I
Weißt du, wie
tilt it
lange
down,
ich auf den
I
Shit
can shoot
gewartet habe, Mann?
really low and get a nice sort of low.
Ich bin so kurz davor, das Ding von der Dings zu holen, von der Tilt hat. Das war der scheiß Kit da. Ne?
There. So you can see, and you can change the menus.
Yo.
So it's quite nice. So we've also, the other thing we've done is we've upgraded the battery, and now it's using an NPF 570 Sony style battery. Now it supports a lot longer battery life, which I think is
What?
important when you're recording the external discs. You know, when you're running external discs, the camera powers the disc, so having more power really helps. So let me show you the battery in the bottom here. So it's the same type of battery door. There it is there, so it's a larger battery.
Ja, geil, Alter.
There it is there, it'll power back up. So
Okay, warte schon, wie lange
now what's the other
batteriert ist?
exciting feature of this is the, turn it back off, back on again, turned itself off. So what's also really nice is this new model has built-in ND filters. They've actually motor filters, so they are a little different to the Ursa Mini Pro ND filters. And if you look at the back here, we've got ND motor, the filter controls here. So let me remove the lens. You can actually see them working if I take the lens off.
Schau mir, blöd.
Do that. I always get nervous taking lenses off. So if you get a close-up there, you can see into the front of the camera. Is that, maybe I'll point to the camera there and you can see it. So now I can change the filters and you can see them move. You got that? you can see them change. So there's two filters and they're changing in and
Zwei Filter, ich glaube einer mit 3 Stops und einer mit 6 Stops, oder?
And there's also an indication on the rear, so let me put the lens back on.
3 und 6 wäre aber geil. Ich habe mit dem Polar Pro einen mit 63, glaube ich. Oder? Wir müssen nachschauen.
The ND filters there.
Es macht
You can
grün.
see there's actually also a status on the LCD to show you what filters are applied. So I think it's much more flexible. I'll turn the filters off. It's fun. I could actually just sit here doing this all day.
Es ist schon geil, ich bin auf die fucking Cages gespannt,
it's great,
wo
of course, having the ND filters
Tilt
built in. It's a
raushält.
much more portable solution. This is a portable camera. But it gives you total control of the shutter angle when you're in bright conditions because you can just pull those ND
kommt
filters
er
in,
so vor, dass du
cut
siehst,
down the
so...
light. Now, there's also support for an electronic, an optional electronic viewfinder. So there's a separate viewfinder that you can purchase and add to the camera if you need it. It's called the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Pro EVF, and it bolts right on top of the camera. Right there.
Hebschnorren.
So let's have a look. I'll show you the EVF. I'll bring it out. You can see it's super tiny there.
Alter, wie geil.
Can get a shot of that. There it is there, and you can see the underside. That's where it plugs into the camera.
Das kaufe ich.
And you can see the lens there, and so I've got a really nice glass lens. You know, it's a professional viewfinder with a glass lens. You know, most viewfinders are just plastic, and you know, especially for portable cameras, and they scratch easy.
Ja, weil es so große Auflösung
This is a
und
glass lens. It's very
wie man
accurate in
das?
focus. It's really clean and very clear. In fact, underneath there's a focus adjustment on the bottom there, so you can adjust it. Now, because it's a professional viewfinder, we've actually also got eyepieces that are included with it. I'll bring them out.
Ha?
There's 4 eyepieces in total.
Aha,
So you've
Augenmuschel,
actually
ja.
got some
Für,
options.
ja.
So you've got an eyepiece that's actually installed on it. Then there's a slightly larger version of that. Then there's also a very large one that's left and right-eyed. So you've got a few different options there.
Ja, Bruder, wie macht euch der Scheiß?
And they come with it. So you don't
Auflösung.
have to buy them separately. Now, the viewfinder is really easy to install. You just unscrew the cover on the top of the camera,
Ja.
and then you can install it on top. So let me show you that. I'll unscrew the cover on the camera. I'll screw it over here.
Ja, aber das Shit ist so richtig kalt angekündigt.
We'll take that off.
Ich bin so froh, dass ich die
There's the cover there. I'll
1100
just show
Stutz
you
nicht bei
quickly.
Digitec
It's just a
ausgegeben habe.
plastic
Für
cover,
die
it just
6K.
covers over the hole.
Ich habe so eine
And then you
Kamerawelle
see
für
there's
da
some space on the top
aber
of the camera.
aber.
You can get a shot of that. You can see where the viewfinder plugs in. So all I need to do is plug the
Ist das
viewfinder in.
ein Custom Slot oder ist das ein HDMI?
Probably should turn the camera off when I do this. And I'll tilt it up.
Schaffst du es?
There it is. I can tighten it down. Just finger tighten it.
Ah, das ist ein
And there it
Thumbscrew.
is. It's installed on the camera. Shot there. Now it tilts up and down like I was just doing to install it. So you can see you got a huge range.
Bös
So you
geil,
can
Alter,
imagine with a
bös
nice big
geil.
eyepiece on there, you know, how nice that looks. Now the focus adjustment is under there.
Ja.
If I turn the camera around, you can see
Ich bin einfach gespannt mit dir. Scheiße, ist sicher etwas um die 3000 Franken oder etwas.
when I adjust the focus.
Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
You can see that. There it is there. So that's under
Ich
there.
bin so froh, dass
And
ich
there's a focus
sie
pack
geschaut
built
habe.
in to the camera to allow you to get really accurate focus. So you just go into the monitor menu and
Das
you
ist
can
etwas
access the
verändert.
focus chart from there. It's a really bright OLED display, so the sensor will.
Ich habe
it's
echt
got a
gewusst, dass es
sensor
ein
on the back, so
bisschen
it
so
turns the
schmäler
OLED on
geworden
and off
ist.
when you're not using it. And the main LCD will also turn off when you're using the viewfinder.
Audio
to save power.
2.
And you can see you can change the viewfinders, the eyepieces out. I'm actually left-eyed, so I like the left eye eyepiece. And so it's a real professional
Also ist ein
solution.
XLR
Now,
oder
if you
wie
look at
das?
the side of the camera,
Ein
you
fucking
see
Mini
we still
XLR.
have the SD card slots on the side. So we've got them there. So
Ja, fuck
card
off.
slots. So you've got the same media that the other card,
Ach, sehr mit dem
that the
SSD.
other models use. And we also have on the side connections here.
2
As we get a
Audio
bit closer to
Ports.
that, we've also got the very similar connections on the side. We still have the HDMI output for monitoring. We've got the USB for recording to external flash disks. We've got the headphone connector. We've also got the video type mic input connector, but we now have an extra XLR connector. So you can plug in 2 separate microphones, and they're both phantom powered.
Das ist
or
ganz
you can,
einfach
of
für
course,
mich
plug in
einfach
for
bei
professional
den
audio. You can
Broadcast,
actually
wir können
plug
so switchen und es separat
XLR sources
durchführen und
now.
nachher
And
nachher
you know,
reinfetzen bei
as
der
far as
Vinci.
phantom power goes, the new battery's got lots of power for the battery. Now, the other thing we've got
Ja, ist einfach Mini XLR.
is we have a new battery grip. If you're doing very long shoots, you really want it to, it's nice to have a battery grip. It's called the Blackmagic Pocket Camera Pro Grip. Sorry, the Blackmagic Pocket Camera Battery Pro Grip. I always get that wrong for some reason. I've got some neural damage that's causing issues with the name. Now it holds 2 extra batteries, but it's a little different. It supports the same large batteries that the camera uses, so those newer type batteries, and it bolts onto the bottom of the camera. So here it is there, you can see, and it's a bit different. It doesn't displace the internal battery. So there it is there. So what you can do is install it on the bottom of the camera, and it won't displace. You're adding 2 extra batteries, and you keep the battery in the camera. So I think this is a better design. Now, if you see how it does that, it's got these power pins there, and that's how that talks to the camera. So there's a spot on the battery tray also to support. There's a cover on the bottom of the camera there, which I'll unscrew.
Echt schwach, ich bin voll geflasht, wenn ich das Chat geschaut habe. Ich habe es heute per Zufall gesehen, dass wir heute einen Stream raushauen.
Power pins on the bottom of the camera, and if you see, you can get a close up of that. Now there's actually a spot on the battery tray to store that little cover I just took off, so you don't lose it. And then if you take the battery grip off, you can then reinstall that on the bottom. So let's put the battery grip on, and you can have a look.
Das ist sexy, ich schwöre.
Basically just mount it down like that and spin the...
Ja, aber die Fans...
There it is. It's all on the camera.
Die Fans sind so geil, so wie eine fucking Ferrari.
So now I'm running 3 batteries in the camera, so it's a monster when you've got that installed. Look at that. And the battery tray slides out, so you can slide the batteries out and you can change them. And the camera still runs, it won't turn off.
Ja, weil die
So
Batterie
you can
ist,
just uninstall it by just running the screw thread back out again. And then you can take it off. So you can really just add it and take it off as you go. You know,
Wäre mal interessant zu wissen, wie lange so eine Batterie habt. Ohne Grip und mit dem Grip.
So the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro we priced at $2,495.
Sure,
and it's in stock and it's available now. The Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera Pro EVF will be priced at $495, and that's also available now and it's in stock. And the Blackmagic Pocket Camera Battery Pro Grip is priced at $145, and that's also available now. Now the battery grip is sold without the batteries because these NP F570 batteries.
Kannst du euch denken, what the fuck, so eine ganze Batterie kostet etwa $70.
So we think the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro is a really great addition to the family. You see we have 3 great cameras depending on the kind of work you're doing. They're all professional digital film cameras. They can be used for all kinds of work, and they're very, very portable. So they're amazing. So one last thing we have just before we go, we also have a software update that's due. It's not quite ready yet, but it's coming soon. So what we're doing is one of the things I didn't show you on the back is we have new software for the 4K and the 6K Pocket Cinema cameras. Now all the cameras get a new RGB histogram. So the current luminance but only histogram doesn't always show you clipped images. You know, if you clip in a single color, sometimes you can't tell because it's not clipping in the luminance. So the new RGB histogram fixes that. And so that's really nice. So if I turn on the 4K camera here, you can see, we'll get a bit of a close-up. You can see that's the RGB histogram there, and I've probably not got a lot of really good things to point it at that's going to show you.
Fuck.
You can see it there. I'll just stop moving the camera around so you can kind of see it. Let me get a good view of that there. So that RGB histogram is much nicer, and there it is on the 4K model, and all the models will get that new histogram when the software update goes out. So I'll place it back in.
Brother.
So that's really nice. Plus, the other great thing is we're upgrading all the color science and all the models. So both
Gen
the
5.
4K and the 6K models will get the new Generation 5 color science. So all the models will have the latest color science from actually the 12K camera research that we've been doing. So it's really exciting. Now that software update will be free. It supports the Blackmagic Pocket Camera 4K, the 6K, and it'll upgrade the new 6K Pro as well. It's called Camera Update 7.3, and it'll be available in about a month or so. So we're still doing a lot of debugging. Obviously, with COVID, it's a bit tough to get things through QA because everyone's everywhere. Every 5 minutes, there's some other breakout. So we're working as hard as we can to get that out the door, and that'll be a free update. So that's about all we have for today. So I've got some really nice switches with the new 18 Mini Extremes. You know, they're very powerful. We have an amazing professional cinema camera with the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro. You know, it's so small when you consider how much we've actually built into it. It's incredible. We have an amazing streaming solution with this new Blackmagic Web Presenter HD. You know, it's the broadcast transmitter for the streaming world. So I think it's really nice. And you know, I've got to thank all the engineers who worked so hard on these new products at Blackmagic. There's engineers all over the world, and everyone's come together and worked really hard. You know, it's tough with COVID because but everyone's done an amazing job. And again, thanks for all you guys, for all your feedback. It's always great working together. It's an exciting industry and we just love being part of it. I'm getting older and it's been doing it for a long time, so it's great to just keep bringing out more and more new products. It's really exciting. When we work together, there's no limit on what we can do and there's no limit to what's possible. So again, please remain safe and I hope it won't be too much longer. We'll be back at trade shows talking again. I love talking as these videos get rather long. So take care and we'll talk soon and take care. Bye.
Okay, bye bye. Also, Bruder, das ist krass. Ey, ich schwöre, Alter, 6G Pro, Mann. Ich schaue mal gerade, wenn es verfügbar ist, dann holen wir so eine Scheiße, Alter, oder 2 sogar. Was ich ein bisschen schade finde, ist, dass das Screen, oder du kannst so tilten. Ich habe keinen Plan, warum alle das nur pennen. Keine Ahnung, wie nennt man das? Pennen. Wenn du nur auf oben und unten kannst tilten. Das ist ein blöd im Fall. Aber mit dem Viewfinder, geiler Shit. Hey, und merci fürs Zuschauen. Bis irgendwann mal mehr.